Hello, everybody. How are you doing today? My name is Tony Rizzano, and you're listening to another episode of the world famous, the University Love, the best podcast in one, two, three galaxies. The best podcast in one, two, three galaxies. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, the best podcast in what? Say it with me. One, two, three galaxies. But ladies and gentlemen, you and I, we just call this show Online Marketing Moves. And we are coming to you live today. Ladies and gentlemen, we have a great show for you today. Ladies and gentlemen, today we are going to talk about how to be a shrewd businessman like a gorilla. Okay? What do I mean by all that? Ladies and gentlemen, one of my one of my one of my books that I read this year was a book about the great Gorilla Monsoon. For those of you that don't know, Gorilla Monsoon was a wrestling announcer, but before that, he was a big time wrestler in the WWF or something like that. Okay, but he got started back in the '60s, the '70s, and he was a wrestler. And by the time I was knee high to a grasshopper, he was an announcer. But I learned more about him in the book that I read. It's a pretty good book actually. And come to find out, Gorilla Monsoon was a pretty good businessman. And ladies and gentlemen, we could all strive to be better in business. Why should we strive to be better in business? Sometimes, ladies and gentlemen, um, you gotta pay attention. The more you pay attention to you, the more the more because we are all, no matter, if we all have a business. The business of I, okay? That's the first business. That's the most important business that you're in. Whether you work for somebody or not, whether you run 10 companies or not, you are in the business of you. That's the first business. And you want to be doing more than just collecting a paycheck. You want to be saving your money. You want to be investing your money. You want to put your money in places that your money can work for you. Why? Because ladies and gentlemen, let me tell you something. It is a lot better to s- it is fun to see the money that you make or the money that you invest or keep. It's always fun to see the dividends, the returns. It's always fun. Okay? It's fun. Um Money is fun. Money can be fun. You can't look at it like, "Oh, man, oh my god, I need more money. How can I get more money?" The money you have is right there, you know? You don't have to play the lottery. You don't have to, hope and pray that the 76ers, parlay hit, your parlay hits, gambling, all that, The business of you can make you all the money that you want. But we get so caught up in the world, you know, we get, we all get caught up in, who's doing what, the Met Gala, nonsense like that. Sometimes you have to focus on you. And that's okay, because you want to be able you want to be able to, you know, um you want to be able to say, "Hey, man, my money's working for me." It's not about, um, you know, because there are people that made $200 million and the money's gone. You know what I mean? There's people that made, $50 million, the money's gone. It's not always about how much you make. It's what you do with it. You're keeping it, you're investing in it. What are you doing with it? And so I'll bring all that up this because we're going to talk about Gorilla Monsoon and his business acumen. Okay, so Gorilla Monsoon, he started off in the World Wrestling Federation as a wrestler, and then eventually he he bought into the company. Um he got to get like 20% of the company. So he was bringing in, so whatever they making, he get 20% of it. That's a good thing. And he was still wrestling, but eventually, eventually all good things come to an end, and wrestling is hard on the body, whether it's scripted or not. it still is a it still is a physical sport, and it's hard on the body. And so, of course, um, since he had an investment in the company, he was not like a normal wrestler who would, you know, be 40 something and be like, man, what am I gonna do? I don't know what I'm gonna do. I got no money, my body. I got to keep trying to wrestle. So he was like 43, and he's like, oh, that's it. Enough of wrestling. And since he had 20% of the company, he was making out pretty good. And then along came, you know, Vince McMahon Jr. And he was like, I want to buy the company, and he wanted to buy everybody out. And so the story goes, um, Gorilla Monsoon made a deal with Vince McMahon Jr. He basically said, "Hey, um, he's like, hey, make sure he has a job for life. He gets a percentage of every show or whatever, this, that, and the other." And come to find out, it was like on top of his job that he had, he was bringing in like $300,000 a year, just just by negotiation, though, just by the deal that he made. And if you can make, you know, if you can make $300,000, and you don't have to be around all the time, you are doing a okay. And so, ladies and gentlemen, we are going to discuss why you should, the content you create, keep the content, use the content, sell the content, because it's first off, it's yours, and it's an investment. The content you create today is the content you can use tomorrow, the next day, the next day, the next day. You just want to get to the point where the money you make, the money that you are receiving is working for you in the long run. Okay. You do not want to be one of these people who are, 70, 75, 80, 85, and they just are totally dependent on a social security check. Okay. Um, Social Security is great. Social Security is cool, but it's not always. Sometimes it's not enough. And what do I mean by that? You know, as you get older, there's more health. There's more, medicine. There's more doctor's appointments. There's you want high toilets in your house. You gotta spend money as you get up. The older you get, it seems like the more money you need, which is, you know, strange, but it's kind of true. And you just want to make sure that you just want to make sure that the money you have is working for you. You do not always want to be a paycheck warrior. Okay, there's nothing wrong with collecting a paycheck. Nothing wrong with getting a paycheck, but that you take some of that money that you make, and use it wisely. Okay. Um, you know, one one book that I read is what is the name of that book? I know I just now I won't be able to remember it. What is the name of that book? It's about Basically, it's about saving and investing, and it's like the greatest. I think it's the greatest salesman, or the richest man in Babylon. There you go. Like the richest man in Babylon. And it's just about a guy who, he's like, hey man, how you got all this money? And he talked about how he took some of his money, he saved it, he invested it, and he made the money work for him. The richest man in Babylon. It's a very good book. And I read that book, and I read that book. I've read that book like two or three times. And yeah, be like Gorilla Monsoon, and that's a very good book. Every book that you read is not always going to be about. Every book does not. The more you learn about different people, and the more you learn about like what like different things about other people. It's like I read a book about Gene Simmons. I don't know any Kiss songs. I don't know nothing about Kiss, But I read a book about Gene Simmons called Me Inc. It's a very good book. It's a very good book about business, and I learned quite a bit. Gene Simmons, he sells Kiss underwear, he sells Kiss cups, he Kiss caskets. I mean, they sell it all, you know what I mean? And so the more you read up on people, it doesn't have to be it doesn't have to be people you like. Sometimes, I read a book about Trump one time. It was a pretty good book. Um, I mean, do I do I think Trump is a great president? No, of course not. He's not. He's not a good president. That's terrible. Um, but he's quite the market machine. You know what I mean? So you can't knock him for that. And so uh, whenever you whenever I see a thing about how he, like used to call the press and all this kind of stuff to get his name out there, it's kind of it's kinda like but at the same time, it's the more you learn, the more you create content, you want people to hear your content, you're like, I gotta market myself, you know? The more you market yourself, the more you put yourself out in the marketplace, the more value you can bring back to you, and the more you can add to your name, you can add to your business, you can add to whatever you want to create, and you will start seeing the dividends. The more you put in, the more you will get out. It might not. I know this is a microwave society, and it's like, oh, I want results right now, but it doesn't always happen that way, and that's okay. Sometimes you got to be patient, okay? But be shrewd, be a businessman like Gorilla Monsoon. Gorilla Monsoon made quite the good living, with the wrestling. And being just by, you know, not trying to be I give you a great example. Ric Flair. Ric Flair the wrestler, great. Ric Flair, the businessman, terrible. Ric Flair is a terrible businessman, ladies and gentlemen. He has like 3 or 4 to 5 divorces. You know, he they say he just used to spend money like crazy. I guess he thought it was still gonna be there. And I'm pretty sure, he can go out and get a check or two here and there, but Ric Flair doesn't have all the money that you would think that he has, or he probably should, because he had a lot of money go through his hands and a lot of money went out of his hands. And not saying you can't spend money, ladies and gentlemen, but you have to. I know a lot of people like to complain, and a lot of people like to say, "Well, you can't live for tomorrow." Think about you. If you got a family, think about your wife, think about your kids. Think about yourself. Um, because a lot of people claim you can't live for tomorrow, but a lot of us are going to be on earth for you know 60, 50 plus years, 60 plus years, 70 plus years, 80 plus years. um at some point, yeah, the money's going to be there. It's always better to see some money than no money, okay? Listen, I'm just telling you. So you can make a deal like Gorilla Monsoon. If you work for a company and they say, I mean, we want to pay you a percentage, you have to say, look at it, see what you think. If you can make deals like that, do it. If you can get money coming in and you don't have to, physically be there to get the money. I mean, that's great. Uh, mm, as I told you before, when I first started doing the podcast, I remember um, it was sponsored by, well, it was on this platform called Anchor, and Anchor would pay you if people listen to a commercial on the podcast, Anchor would pay you. So by the time I got up to like a hundred episodes, I remember every day I would see like somebody download an episode from episode 1 or episode 2, and the money would come in, and then they was like, "All right, you want to cash out the money?" And I would say, "Of course." And I would cash out the money, and I would be like, This is pretty sweet, man, you know? Or like one time I remember um I had did like 200 episodes and it was like 3 or 4 people, I guess they downloaded all the episodes, and so it popped up. It was like, "Oh, you had 800 downloads in a day," you know? It's small time compared to some, but hey, you know? But I just remember I was like, "Ooh, look at them dollars," you know what I'm saying? And, that was work that I already done, and, I was very happy, you know? And I was like, "Hey, man, this investing is always this investment is alright with me, you know? Better than playing the lottery, ladies and gentlemen." But ladies and gentlemen, that's it. Be shrewd, be a businessman like a gorilla, okay? And so we will be back tomorrow with the all new episode of Online Marketing Moves. But until then, my name is Tony Rizano. Thank you for listening. God bless each and every one of you. And as always, everybody, stay with me, everybody. As always, everybody, peace.